Hello, people, and welcome to another Conspiracy 420. This is episode 79, and we're talking about the voodoo queens of New Orleans. The Queen of New Orleans, black woman that was a free woman also in New Orleans. Who are we talking about, Mike?
Talking about the great Marie Laveau.
Marie Laveau. She's like a folktale, man. She was married to some guys, too, that were pretty weird guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, her whole if you've been to New Orleans, she's all over the place, and she's been dead for 140 years. But
yeah, but her supposedly she married one guy, had something like 21 kids or 20 kids.
Well, there's a lot of folklore, and a lot of it's not true. Okay,
yeah, it's crazy.
And interestingly enough, there was a lot of many years where it really was just a lot of legends. But I think in the last 10 years or so, there's been some research. They found some records, and it settled the debate as to whether she was actually born in New Orleans or not. She was, okay? There was always talk that she was actually born in Haiti and traveled over, but that was not true, okay? Because they found birth certificates.
But you know what the problem is? The magic that she studied was pretty much Haitian, Haitian magic.
Oh, absolutely. She was from a Haitian background, for sure. Okay.
You know, the voodoo doll, if people talk about voodoo doll, the original voodoo doll was a thing to heal people. Like you would make a voodoo doll yourself, and then you would like press the part that was, that were hurt to try to get a cure, to try to fix itself. Well, and then it became something so sinister that they used it to put a curse on people.
Well, funny. It's like anything else. You could use it for good or bad, but voodoo dolls and all that stuff. If you know anything about voodoo, they don't really play a big part. Okay, it's not the whole religion. That people aren't just sitting around sticking pins in shit all day long.
But that was the thing, just to fuck with people's head.
And it did.
Enough, and people would be like, "Oh yeah,
yeah." No, it did. Okay. God, some of the best horror movies, like remember The Serpent in the Rainbow?
Mm-hmm.
That was all about voodoo, and that's based on a true story. That's a great movie, but when it comes to Marie Laveau, I've always been super fascinated with her ever since I first went to New Orleans. And New Orleans is like one of my favorite places in the world to visit. I love the food. I love the culture. I love the people. I think it's just, outside of New York, it's like, my favorite place. And I got to get down there again soon. It's been too long. But when you go down there, the presence of Marie Laveau is felt everywhere in the French Quarter. Okay, the French Quarter, they've commercialized her. It's true. Okay, like her image is on shirts, and there's the Voodoo Museum where you could buy Marie Laveau stuff and jewelry, and all that.
She's also a character in American Horror Story.
I was gonna say, Angela Bassett. Yeah. Angela Bassett did a great job, of bringing her character to life. But I think as much as she was great in that season, the Coven season of American Horror Story, I think that was the third season it was on the air. It really only dealt with, and most of the legends really only deal with one side of her. Okay, she was multifaceted. There was a lot. I'm going to talk about stuff today that maybe people haven't heard about her. Okay. I'm going to get into a little bit of her, her history, her parents' history. Not much is known about her childhood, unfortunately, but she was a devout Catholic, which maybe to people not aware, but they may think, well, how could she practice voodoo and be a devout Catholic? Well, it's very easy. Okay, it's very easy. Just like a devout Catholic could practice Santeria.
Yeah, right? My mother does Santeria and voodoo. It's a mixture of both things put in one.
Right. But a lot of the saints are the same, and you're praying to the saints for intercession, or
Yeah.
for them to do you a favor. You light a candle. They have all different rituals. Sometimes money's involved, right? Things like that, coins. And she was known as a healer and an herbalist. People would go to her when they were sick, and she could heal them. And that's a part of the, when you think of voodoo and stuff, you're thinking of the evil shit, but it's not just that, So before I start, I want to mention there's two books here that I like a lot, and I feel that if you're interested in, you should read it. The first is this book that came out in 2020 called The Magic of Marie Laveau. Okay, and it says Embracing the Spiritual Legacy of the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans by Denise Alvarado. Denise, I believe, is a New Orleans native. She's very familiar with how it all works down there. And she kind of deconstructs the whole Marie Laveau folklore from between myth and what we know is fact. Okay. And, there's even some stuff about, how to be a devotee to her and all that. And there's a website called creolemoon.com. creolemoon.com. Check it out. There's even she offers courses on Marie Laveau. You can take an online course, and I signed up for it. There's nothing yet for 2022, but when it comes out, I'm gonna take that course. Even if I think it's like $75. It's just you learn like everything about her. It's very interesting. And then there's another book by Robert Tallant. Robert Tallant was a famous New Orleans writer. He wrote a book called The Voodoo Queen. He's known for another book called, I believe it's called Voodoo in New Orleans. This book is, it came out, I think, 1953. And it's just a dramatization of all the folklore that you heard. And he kind of turns it into a whole story. Okay. And with Marie being the center character. And it's fascinating. I mean, they should make a fucking movie on this, as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure that the first author, Denise, probably didn't like this book too much because there's a lot of myth in here and a lot of, kind of like old mentality when it comes to things. But it's a good book anyway. So I do draw from what I'm going to talk about. I do draw a lot from both those books. But now, Marie Laveau, her full name was Marie Catherine Laveau, and she was born September 10th, 1801. Now, she's practically, like I said, the patron saint of New Orleans. Yeah. She practiced voodoo, but she was also a devout Catholic. She was a free woman of color. Okay. She died June 15th, 1881. But who was she? Okay. I mean, other than the stories you've heard, maybe that she practiced voodoo, who was she? To understand it, you really got to go back to her parents' time and even before. Now, Marie's grandmother, who was named Catherine, was a slave and was owned by Henry Roche. Henry Roche was also known as Henry Belair, and it's believed he fathered several children with Catherine. Wow. Okay, so he was the slave owner, but he was with the slave. That happened all the time. Okay, one of the children was named Marguerite, and she was born in 1783. Now, Marguerite would eventually become the mother of Marie Laveau. Okay, Catherine, who made a living selling foodstuffs and particularly something called calas, which is calas is a fried pastry, a Creole dessert. Okay, and she would eventually be sold by Henry Roche and actually sold to two other slave owners until she ended up in 1784 with a free woman of color named Francois Pommet. Now, excuse my French accent if I sound like Inspector Clouseau. There's a lot of French in here, and I never took French in high school. I should have, but I didn't. A lot of pretty girls in French class, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I should have done that. But after 11 years with Pomey, Catherine paid $600 for her freedom and took the last name of Henry. She became Catherine Henry. She became a successful businesswoman and bought some land, including the well-known Laveau house, which is on St. Anne Street in the French Quarter, between Ramparts and Burgundy Streets. Now, in 1790, Catherine's daughter, Marguerite Henry, she took the name too, was freed by her owner. And she subsequently, in time, had several children with a Frenchman named Henri d'Arcantel. Henri d'Arcantel. But he would not be Marie Laveau's father. Okay? As a result of a little hanky-panky fooling around, she had a brief relationship with a man named Charles Laveau, and he would be the father of Marie. Marie Catherine Laveau would be born in 1801, but Charles is not mentioned on the birth certificate.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, she was with somebody else. Later on, though, documents of his would be found, and he would acknowledge Marie as his daughter. Okay, he would recognize her. And he did have a relationship with her. Okay, so early histories of Marie cite her father as a wealthy white planter, farmer. Okay, but that's not really accurate. He was a successful free man of color. He wasn't white. Okay, and he was also involved in real estate and the slave trade.
Wow.
Okay? Yeah. Now, what was a free man of color? Just to kind of understand that definition. You didn't have to be a full black man. You could be part. Okay. Creole people generally are mixed. Okay. You could be what's called a quadroon. Okay. Which I believe is 1/4 black. Okay. So you would get that title, free man.
I thought that was an octoroon.
The octoroon is 1/8. Okay. And then you have a maroon, which I believe is half, if I remember right. Now, Marie was baptized 6 days after her birth, which was the common practice back then, by a Father Père Antoine. Okay, and that was at St. Louis Cathedral in New Orleans. There's a Père Antoine Street. Okay, he was a famous priest in the town there at the time. Now, her grandmother, Catherine, is noted down as the godmother. And there's a gentleman named Jose Joaquin Velasquez as the godfather. But what he was sort of he wasn't with Catherine. Okay, he was a godfather for hire. Okay, like if you needed a godfather,
you got this guy.
You got this guy, and he's like everybody's godfather. Okay, because there had to be a godfather. You know, New Orleans is a very Catholic city. It still is. It was a lot more back then. Okay, and keep in mind this is pre-Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah.
So this is not, even though it's New Orleans, it's not part of America yet. It will be soon.
And it wasn't even New Orleans. It was called New France.
Well, New France was the area of Louisiana. Yeah, it was called New Orleans, but there is an Orleans. There is an Orleans in France. Okay, so they just renamed it. But in a few years, Thomas Jefferson would buy that whole region, and going all the way up to Canada, the Louisiana Purchase. So at this point, they're not Americans yet. They're still French.
Yeah.
Okay. Unfortunately, like I said, little is known really about her childhood. Other than that, she lived in that small house on St. Anne Street with her grandmother. Now, on August 4th, 1819, the records show that at the age of 17, she married a free man of color named Jacques Paris. He was a carpenter, and he was originally from Haiti. Okay.
Yeah, he was also known as Jack Santiago.
Right. Some records show it as Santiago. A free man of color with the name Santiago and the name Paris. Coming from Haiti, he was probably Spanish, French mix of some kind.
He was a Quarun man of color, free man of color.
Now, she got married in the same famous St. Louis Cathedral. Father Père Antoine presided over the ceremony, and there was a witness there named Adolphe Mazareau. He was a lawyer that was a friend, and local law kind of says that he was one of her many lovers over the years. Okay, wow. Yeah. Now, Marie and Jacques were given a house on the 1900 block of North Rampart Street by her father, Charles. Supposedly, also the famous gold hoop earrings that you always see her wear, that was a wedding present. They were a wedding present by her father as well.
Okay.
The baptismal records say that Marie and Jacques had two daughters. One was called Marie Angélie Paris in 1822 and Félicité Paris in 1824, though nobody knows what happened to them. Okay, they just drop off the map. Nobody knows what happened to the kids. Some of the records for the parish are lost in that time. Interestingly, in the book, The Voodoo Queen, they die, the kids. So I don't know if the Robert Tallant knew something or he just dramatized it. But it's their death that brings her closer to practicing voodoo more, and Jacques Paris did not approve of it. Okay, and again, this is all just a lot of legend. Okay, but what we do know is that Jacques Paris himself disappeared in 1824. Okay, so it was right after the birth of his second child. Local legend says it was because he disapproved of Marie's voodoo practices. Okay, he believed, voodoo was the devil's work. He was a devout Catholic. He was from Haiti. He probably saw some things. He didn't like it. It wasn't any part of it. Okay. Now, her mother, Marguerite, did practice voodoo and may have taught Marie quite a few things.
I think it's like teach down. You had it down,
Yeah, it's right. There's an oral history to pass it down. Mother to daughter, all the way down the line. But Marie was I think from local legend has her as kind of apprehensive in it and not totally into it, but slowly gets pushed towards it. Okay, and then realizes that it's her calling. Okay. Jacques Paris supposedly left Marie at that point and joined the Merchant Marine. Okay. Wow. And there was an accident. He was supposedly swept overboard like in a storm. Okay. And they never found him. There's never been a death record or anything located. But Marie, at that point in 1824, when her husband disappeared, became known as the Widow Paris. Okay, that's how she was referred to in the French Quarter.
She also used to visit a lot of prisoners in jail too.
Oh yeah. I'll talk about some of the very kind things that she did. She would bring food to prisoners. She would bring medicine to prisoners. And there was a prison right there. I think not too far from where she lived in the quarter. I can't imagine what a prison was like back then. It had to be a hellhole. Okay, so she was known as treating them. She would do that, and that came from her Catholic upbringing to be that way. Okay. About a year after Jacques' disappearance, Marie entered what was called a placage relationship with a wealthy white man named Louis Christophe Dominique de Glapion. Okay, a lot of names, a lot of French names going on right there. Also known as Captain Glapion. Interestingly, in the Robert Tallant book, Captain Glapion is the one that tells her that he died on his ship, that Jacques died on his ship. Okay. And then he ends up with her somehow. I don't know if there's any truth to that. I don't know if there's a connection between Jacques and him, but he did serve gallantly during the War of 1812 with Andrew Jackson in the Battle of New Orleans. Glapion was in what was called the 9th Native Regiment. Now, that battle was about, even though it was the War of 1812, that battle took place about 1815. And if you remember the War of 1812, it was the second war we had against the British.
Yeah.
Okay. And the Battle of New Orleans is a fascinating story because it happened, most of it happened when
after the treaty was already sound.
Right. The war was officially over. Okay. Yeah. And they didn't know. They kept fighting. Okay. But Andrew Jackson was a famous general, and he, his gallantry in that battle, preceded him to become president. So that's
burned down during the war 1812. They burned down Atlanta, right?
No, they burned down the White House.
The White House, but so some of the cities in Atlanta, some cities were getting burned.
Atlanta burned in the Civil War.
Yeah, Civil War, yeah.
Yeah, but I believe Sherman, the Union general, did that. But in the War of 1812, the British sailed up to Chesapeake, right into D.C., and not only burned the White House, it burned quite a bit of D.C. Okay, so crazy. Yeah, crazy shit. Now, I mentioned she was in what was called a placage arrangement. Now, a placage arrangement was commonplace in those days due to Louisiana's law against interracial marriages. What it is if you enter into a placage relationship, it would be a white man entering into a relationship, long-term relationship with a woman of color, that you could set up a house, you could provide for her care, have children. Generally, you didn't live there. I think that you live separately. Okay,
so but it's almost like having a mistress.
It's like having a mistress, but it was accepted. You were taking care of her. As long as she was taken care of, it was no problem. Okay. So Marie and Christophe had 7 children between 1827 and 1838. That's a lot of kids. That's a
lot of kids.
That's what, seven kids in 11 years? Damn. Okay. Now, however, only 2 daughters would actually survive to adulthood. One would be Marie Philomene and Marie Eloise. Okay, Marie Eloise. Notice they all take the name Marie. That's very common in the culture at the time. Okay, now.
You know what's funny about Marie? She owned slaves too, which was weird for a person that. Don't you find that kind of fascinating?
I find that very interesting. But I think it's in the history of slavery is a very tough subject for people to get their heads around. And it's discussed in sometimes very angry tones. And you can't when it's discussed that way, you can't get to the history of it and understanding how it was such a part of life. Yes, it's reprehensible. Yes, it's disgusting, wrong. It should never have happened. It's destroyed millions of lives. I get that. But Black people had a hand in it, okay, in some cases, okay? There were Black slave owners in the United States. They were, And there was a slave trade in New Orleans before it was even America, okay, when it was just New France, okay, and there was a lot of money to be made in that, and you know, I would imagine she probably treated her slaves very well, but still were slaves, you know.
Yeah.
You just have to understand it. Now, the two that lived to adulthood, the two children, one would be known as Marie Laveau II, and she would kind of be Marie's successor as the Voodoo Queen. Okay. Also, she was known as Madame Legendaire. Okay. The other one, Marie Louise, she didn't have any part of that stuff. She just lived her own life. Christophe, Marie Laveau's husband, died on June 26th, 1855. And it's been said that after his death, Marie Laveau herself became even more of a devout Catholic as she tried to get to grips with that, you know, of her husband dying. And she kind of was very devout, and she also brought a lot of people into the Catholic Church. Okay, her friends and followers.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, Marie Laveau, we know, was a dedicated practitioner of voodoo. And she was known as an herbalist and a healer. By her middle age, she was the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans. Okay, her reputation was solid. But there were actually two queens before her. One was named Sanité Dide. She ruled for a few years. Marie didn't know her. Okay. Eventually, she would be followed by Marie Salopé, okay, who Marie Laveau also knew and learned from as well, okay. And Marie Laveau would follow after her death, Salopé's death. Marie herself was as well as a slave trader, okay, and a slave owner. She was a hairdresser by trade. That's what she was good at. She could do hair, okay. And because of that, she had a lot of access to people, okay. And she was very well respected. She had a great reputation as a hairdresser and as a reputable person that you could trust. And a lot of the white elites of New Orleans were her customers.
Wow.
And she had access to their homes. She had access to their gossip. Okay. Now, you know, just like a barbershop, what's a hair salon? It's a fucking place where everybody talks shit.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's been going on for hundreds of years. So forever. So, you know, she would hear about the gossip of the wealthy people, and she would use these things sometimes for her advantage. Sometimes they came to her for her services. Okay, said, you know, she could do everything from love potions to, you know, medicinal healing kind of stuff. So if somebody in the family was sick, you could go to her, you could get the potion or whatever it was, herbs, whatever. And, you know, so she had rich people as clientele, as well as the poor that were in the quarter. Okay, so she really had the ear of everybody. A lot of times she had a lot of control over people because they were afraid of her. Okay, and so she had that up.
That's always bugged me out. There were people that would terrify her because she had that legacy of, oh, she's like the Voodoo Queen or whatever.
Yeah.
She'll put a curse on you.
Yeah, but, you know, it's funny. I don't know if she ever did. You know, I don't know.
The weird thing is they call her the Voodoo Queen, but then she was such a Catholic that it's funny how she got that reputation.
I think because of the city being so Catholic, there's a natural fear of that. Okay, so, you know, you had that section of the population that was just terrified of voodoo. Okay, yeah, it's kind of hard
You
to
have
understand today, but
you probably have people go, I don't want to be turned into a zombie or something. You know how
yeah.
those people want.
Well,
It's like
she used
crazy.
to have a snake, okay, a big
It's
snake.
rumored named Zombie, an
It
African
was
god.
called Grand Zombie, I believe. It was
Yeah,
called Grand Zombie.
and it was named after an African god. That's what it was.
Yeah, yeah. Now, to get into kind of, to understand the way that she helped people, like I said before, with the prisoners and things like that, through most of her life, New Orleans, especially in the summertime, had an epidemic of the yellow fever. Okay, which was yellow fever is not a pleasant thing, especially in the summer months. Okay, it would be prevalent. Also, cholera outbreaks would happen all the time in New Orleans because of the filthy conditions. They just pump raw sewage into the Mississippi. Okay, there was always a lot of garbage and rats in the streets and things like that. And her herbal medicines saved countless amount of people from cholera and the yellow fever.
Yep.
Okay. So it's unknown how many people she saved, but some of those diseases, like I think yellow fever, like if you get to it early, I think you can knock it out. So she knew the symptoms, she knew how to treat it. Okay. And she was credited for saving a lot of people's lives. Now, most of her voodoo knowledge came from her mother and her mother before that. Okay. But one person that has to be mentioned as a teacher was Dr. John. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about Dr. John, the musician. Okay. I'm talking about the real Dr. John, who the musician named himself after. He was the Grigri man. Okay. He was a medicine man. He was originally from Senegal in Africa. Okay. And he set up shop. I believe he was in Haiti and then ended up in New Orleans and set up shop outside the quarter in the Bayou area. Okay. And he was a Grigri man. He could do magic. He could do the spells and potions that Marie Laveau would know and learn, and she would learn from him. She at St. John's Bayou. There's on St. John's Eve, okay, which I believe is in June. They would have ceremonies, and he would preside over them. He was a very tall, muscular black man. I believe he was bald. Wore a big hat and things like a typical look. Okay.
Yeah.
Now she was pretty much a student of him for a long time. He has an interesting history if you look him up. I won't get into it too much, but he would eventually be like broke and have to be taken care of by his kids.
Wow.
He extended himself a little too far. He never trusted banks, and people ripped him off, and eventually he was penniless. But at the height of his power, he was somebody you didn't mess with,
Wow.
And between the two of them, practicing at the same time,
Do you ever hear about the misfits, the band of Misfits going to her graveyard and getting arrested because they were like, suppose if you go to her graveyard, you mark an X and you like knock on the grave and this to grant you a wish, and once she grants you the wish, you come back, you circle the X, and you give her an offering, which is fucking bizarre to this day. There's still people.
Well, people still do it, but let me just explain about her death for a minute, and I'll get into that. Okay, because there's been some changes in the last couple of years with this. Now, on June 17th, 1881, Marie Laveau passed away. She was just short of her 80th birthday. She was still 79, and it was said that she died peacefully at home. Her funeral was lavish, okay, and it was attended by a diverse crew of people. Okay, you had everything from the elite white people of New Orleans to, the French Quarter blacks, and everybody was there. Everybody was there. Now it's believed that her daughter Marie Laveau II may have taken over the Voodoo Queen title either right before her mother's death or immediately after. Okay, there's an interesting thing about Marie Laveau II. She's the one, legend says, that was really a little more evil than her mother. Okay, used voodoo for evil practices. And I think a lot of the legends of that time with Marie Laveau kind of like meshed together. There's a confusion as to who's who. Okay, either the mother or the daughter. Okay, and I mean, in those days, people were having kids when they were, they were on their fourth kid at 18. So she was probably young looking and looked like her mother, could pass for her mother. And, there's a lot of stories like after Marie Laveau died that she was seen, but some people say, no, that's really the daughter. Okay. So there's a lot of confusion as to who was who. Now, you mentioned the tomb. She was buried in St. Louis Cemetery, number 1. There's actually 2 of them. Excuse me. Now, in New Orleans, the tombs are above ground. You know that, right?
Yeah.
So, and the reason that is because the water table is so high, all you got to do is dig a foot and you got water. So they have to have all kinds of the burials have to be above ground, otherwise they wouldn't stay. When New Orleans was founded, they tried to bury people in regular cemeteries. Okay, first storm came along and washed all the dead people right back into the city. So they stopped doing that. Very interesting though. Like when you go there, there's a bunch of tours. There's actual cemetery tours. And they tell you how the cemeteries are reused over and over and over. Okay, it isn't just like you buried there and you stay there. Okay, there's a point when they will take you out when you're just bones and reuse you again, reuse the tomb again. Okay, wow. Usually it's the same family like that, but in the days before embalming, you could walk near the St. Louis Cemetery and hear popping sounds, strange sounds coming from the tombs because the bodies are, rotting and decomposing in the heat, and it's inside of a brick tomb. It's almost like an oven. Yeah. Okay. So, there's all kinds of haunted legend stories based on all that stuff. But with Marie Laveau, it became a tradition to go to her tomb and put an X on it, like you said, and say a wish. And if you got it, you had to bring an offering back later on after you got your wish. Okay. Some kind of candle or food or something by her grave.
Yeah.
When you go there, there's always gifts. There's always things there. There's candles. It's like she died yesterday. Okay.
It's fucking weird.
It is weird. Now you mentioned the Misfits. Okay. They did a show there in 1982 and got into the cemetery. And actually, it's not what I had heard is it wasn't that tomb. Okay. There's actually 2 spots that people say is her. There's the one that has all the X's on it that everybody thinks is her. Yeah. But there's another tomb in St. Louis II Cemetery, which they don't like you to go to because it's like right next to the projects. But I've been in there. Okay. Yeah. I went there many years ago. It's only like another 15-minute walk or something from the first cemetery. It's very close. Okay. But it is in an area that's all projects. But it isn't, projects in New Orleans are like 3-story looking, they're not like the projects we have in New York. Nothing like
20-story.
Yeah. Supposedly at the St. Louis II site that some people say is her. The Misfits tried to break open that tomb. I mean, could you imagine if they succeeded with it? What would you want to do? What are you going to do with that? Just pull the ball?
Imagine you see it's just gangster, Frank Van Schuler and all these weird guys just breaking into a tune. It's like pretty fucking funny, dude.
Yeah. Let's exhume Marie Laveau.
They would have got in there and be like, they would have sang Halloween or something. They don't know.
Yeah. I think it was on Halloween or something. They were playing down there.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, yeah. But so that's all I got today on Marie Laveau. There's the two books I mentioned. Okay, I'll mention it again. The Voodoo Queen by Robert Tallant, and then this excellent book called The Magic of Marie Laveau. Two fascinating reads on the subject. Very interesting. Go to New Orleans. You'll see her presence. You'll feel her presence. She's part of the town. She's been dead for 200 and almost 160 years, whatever it is, 140 years.
Yeah.
But it's like she's not dead at all.
That's pretty incredible.
Yep.
And people still putting stuff in her grave like she died yesterday. Pretty impressive.
Yes. And people believe in her, and there's something there, I just, what I wanted to do with this show was kind of downplay the voodoo a little bit and show the other stuff. I thought that was a good thing to do because she was very, very multi-layered person. It wasn't just voodoo.
Her being a hairdresser, I didn't realize that she was a hairdresser, but I knew she was a healer because she was an herbalist. So she'll get people teeth and stuff.
Yeah.
And help them out. Like if you had a cold, so that you go to her and she put up a potion, you drank it, you felt better, which was pretty fascinating about that whole thing too, Yeah.
And being a hairdresser, she could get pieces of your hair. There you go.
Another interesting thing.
Yep. There was actually, I believe there was some kind of law. Not a law. I shouldn't say a law, but there was some kind of tradition that hair salons didn't burn anybody's hair to get rid of it. So people would take it. So I'm not sure the exact thing, but you could use hair in a ritual, right?
Yeah. Like a piece of hair that you take it just to.
And Angela Bassett in American Horror Story, she was a hairdresser.
Yes, she was.
In that season, yeah.
All right, Mike. So another excellent. This concludes our Black History Month for the month of February. For two rock show and two conspiracy show. Very interesting conspiracy. So, Mike, how can we get to you if we need to reach you or contact you?
Okay, I'm all over social media. RockerMike212 on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook as RockerMike. And, of course, the Rock Show Podcast group page on Facebook. Look for that. I'm on Clout Hub and MeWe as RockerMike as well. And on the MeWe site, I don't talk about the MeWe stuff too much, but I do have a Conspiracy 420 page. If you find me as Rocker Mike and you look in my groups, and I do post all the Conspiracy 420 shows there as well. Gets a view here and there, gets a couple. Not many people on MeWe, but it's okay.
Do you see the John show? It hit 1,000 views.
Yep. And I was very slow at first. I was surprised. It took off somehow.
I think because people had to catch up for a while because they were like everything was very slow. But it was that weird after New Year's and stuff. I guess people now are going back to watching stuff.
Yeah. Cool. So that's all I got for you today, sir. What about you? Where can we find you?
You can find me on any social media: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And drop a line at Getting Lumped Up, and I can answer you back, or you can request a show or a topic that you want us to review, or even a rock show that you guys want us to do. But you can reach me at anything Getting Lumped Up. And like always, people, remember, don't get drunk.
Get lumped up.
We'll see you next week. Have a good one.
Take care, people.